Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Tuesday Tips. I'm your host, Marin Smith. I'm the content manager here at Grow Schools. And as usual, we're here on Tuesday at 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern for 10 minutes discussing the biggest challenges facing school leaders. And this week, we have Maddy Marlton back, VP of Real Estate Acquisitions here at Grow Schools. Thanks for joining us, Maddy.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll be having a discussion on school facilities again, and this discussion will be around your school building as an investment in your school's mission. So, as school leaders know, managing your facility, and that's whether you're on the path to ownership or you're leasing a building, requires a lot of planning, a lot of collaboration, and a bit of foresight. So understanding your options, budgeting realistically, and negotiating strategically can help you sort of maximize your facility as an asset. And that's where we're going to hear from Maddy today. So we'll kind of start the discussion with this question around what are the key financial indicators that suggest a school might be ready to transition from leasing to that big decision of purchasing a property or starting on the path to building ownership.
Yeah, great question. So ideally, a school looking to purchase has strong financial health. And in a perfect world, that looks like having stable or increasing enrollment, maybe having a wait list, having a long-term charter renewal, which really points to operational health tying into the financials, having several years of positive cash flow, and having some cash reserves on hand for any unforeseen expenses or maybe building improvements that you want to conduct after purchasing the property. So say those are key factors, but if your school doesn't meet all these requirements, there's still a path to purchasing a property. It may just look a little different or impact the timing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Those are great tips, especially the waitlist piece, right? Because it's important to be able to show a potential lender like, hey, we have students lined up, we're on a path of growth. We're stable in our community.
Exactly. Yeah.
So when that time is right, at that point, what funding options are available specifically to charter schools?
Yeah, so there's several different funding opportunities available for charter schools. There are facility grants and programs like charter school facility grant programs. So that could look like reimbursing lease costs for schools that serve specifically low-income students. California offers the SB 740 to schools that are leasing space. And a lot of times we find that's a factor for schools that are evaluating the decision to buy or continue staying in their lease. There are federal charter school grant programs for replication or expansion. There's low-cost financing options via charter school bonds, which are ideal for larger and more well-established schools. There are new market tax credits, and those can be great to reduce project costs by offering tax credits to investors. Typically, there is a large component of improvement or redevelopment associated with the acquisition and the overall project. There are also mission-aligned lenders out there that offer pre-development, acquisition, and construction loans specifically to schools. And philanthropic impact investors. So foundations and education-focused investors sometimes offer recoverable grants or low-interest loans for charter schools to consider. And then lastly, I'd say there's the tax-exempt lease to purchase financing. So this structure allows charter schools to lease a facility either with the option to buy or with a path to ownership, which is what Grow Schools is able to offer charter schools as they're evaluating their opportunities to buy a facility.
Great. Yeah. Just want to take a quick pause and welcome those of you who are joining us just a few minutes late. We're tackling questions today about school buildings and what options are available, whether you're leasing, trying to consider whether it's that moment to gain more autonomy over your school building. And we have Maddy here answering all of our questions. And she just gave us a lot of details about the different funding options that are available for schools. And it sounds like there's quite a lot of research to look into if schools are at that moment when it's time to start thinking about transitioning. That said, whatever of those options a school is exploring, even more straightforward options like bank loans or the bond option you mentioned, or even if schools are negotiating their lease sort of in preparation for whatever their next move might be, if it's not quite time for them to buy, timing is really critical. And I know you've spoken a lot in the past about how starting the process early and making sure schools give themselves ample time to navigate all the complexities involved in those different funding options is really important. And that, includes things like construction projects, facility expansions, tenant improvements. They all require meticulous planning, coordination. And so it's important that schools don't underestimate the time needed to complete them successfully. So can you walk us through kind of a typical timeline? And maybe there's no typical timeline, but sort of a rough timeline, let's say, for a school property acquisition ideally from initial consideration to actually closing on the property.
Yeah, so I always say it's never too early to start having the conversation about your facility. You never know what could come up. You never know what opportunities could arise, and you want to make sure that you have everything that you need from team to finances in place in order to jump on whatever opportunity is out there. So that said, there are many different paths for acquisition. So your school could be considering purchasing your existing facility from current ownership who may or may not be affiliated with your school, locating and purchasing a new site to move to or expand into, or purchasing land and developing a new facility. So each of these paths has different timelines associated with them as the complexity varies. Purchasing the facility you currently occupy is probably the most straightforward, and it could be possible, I'd say, maybe within a timeline of 4 to 6 months once you go through the negotiation and closing processes, while locating and purchasing a new site could take closer to 12 to 18 months. But it really depends on what inventory looks like in the market. If there's a plug and play school-like property that's already available, then that may move quicker through the process. Or if it's a conversion project that requires a zoning change, that's going to take a lot longer. And then adding on the potential improvements that are needed to get it operational is, again, a big factor in that timing. And then purchasing land and developing a new facility, that could take closer to 18 to 24 months. You always just want to budget and allow for more time in that sort of a process because, again, you don't know what's going to come up. And timelines just in this construction market do tend to slip. And it really does vary location to location on what approvals are needed from the city and that sort of thing. But overall, regardless of which type of acquisition you're considering, there are some key milestones in the process. And those look like starting off with strategic planning and feasibility to assess your facility needs and then the financing options. Beginning the site search and or going through the due diligence process. So touring, locating a property, assessing infrastructure needs, submitting your offer, conducting site feasibility, and getting any cost estimates for work and third-party reports and all of that. And then financing and entitlement periods. So applying for financing, working with legal and real estate professionals through the title and third-party reports, maybe navigating conditional use permit process if that's applicable, and that specifically can contribute to a longer timeline. And then finally, closing. And so finalizing your financing, securing any permits, securing plans for build out, and all of that may happen in parallel around the time that you're closing on the property. So lots of different paths that exist out there for schools to find their forever home. Each one has its own challenges, but also its own opportunities, and some different timelines associated with those. So it's definitely important to think about if your timing needs are more immediate, what you may want to consider versus if you have a long lead time to kind of go through the various processes to build out a new space.
Yeah. Yeah, and I hear that message loud and clear, you know, given all those details you just gave us, that it's never too early to
Right.
start looking around, making sure you're well positioned so you can pounce when the time is right.
Exactly.
And that kind of leads into my final question for you, which is how can school leaders balance, and I know this is a big question, so maybe the short version of immediate space needs versus planning for the future when they're looking at potential properties when it comes to, because, you know, not everyone can walk into a property and have vision, right? That takes a bit of talent. So do you have any recommendations there?
Yeah, so I would say the key is making sure that you're right sizing for today and what your school needs today, but also planning for the future growth. The most important piece is not wanting to overextend your budget, chasing a dream campus, which can happen fairly quickly. Things add up. But you want to look to acquire a property that really meets the growth plan for the next several years. And maybe it allows for further expansion down the road via modular classrooms or phased construction. Maybe there's some excess land for future development that you could utilize. So just while you want to keep the long-term vision in mind, ensuring that it's still affordable for the foreseeable future and making sure that you're budgeting conservative estimates so that you don't overextend on your dream project. But beyond that, zoning and CUP flexibility are going to be really key components, and they should be considered just to make sure that you're choosing a site that allows for the use and additional classrooms or facilities in the future without significant re-entitlement. That can be a big pain from a time and money standpoint. And just to reiterate on my last answer, it's a really big factor in which sort of property that you're going after, because it will have some issues that you're going to have to navigate through that. So beyond that, considering properties that can maybe accommodate shared use or temporary structures to provide the interim growth options while schools are still continuing to expand. And maybe considering subleasing to supplement additional income to support the budget. Those are all great options to consider if it is looking a little tight on the financial side. And then, of course, location is everything in real estate. So keeping in mind location and transportation, those should be top of mind, just making sure that the property's in the right area, serving your families. There's good long-term traffic flow. If you do continue to expand, it can support more students, more families. There's enough space for drop-off and pickup logistics. That's often something that's tough to go back and implement. So you want to make sure it's there on the front end. But overall, just flexibility in design and staying within budget are key components to balance those current needs that your school is facing today, but also make sure that you're planning for future opportunities down the road and whatever growth is anticipated.
Yeah, an important balance to strike.
Always tough.
Yeah, indeed. Well, Maddy, I want to thank you for all of your insights today. For those of you watching, you can hear more from Maddy at the event called Financial Survival Kit for Schools. Just head over to growschools.com. Thanks again to Maddy and everyone that joined us today. And we'll see you back here on Tuesday Tips.
Thanks.